let's talk about one of the most powerful skills you can learn for any relationship. It's all about learning to stop believing every single story your mind cooks up during a conflict. Because honestly, the initial argument, that's usually not the real problem. The story we tell ourselves about it, that's where things get complicated.
You know the feeling, right? In the middle of a heated disagreement, everything feels so incredibly black and white. It's intense, and your perspective feels like the undeniable capital T truth. But then, a few hours pass, maybe you sleep on it, and that intensity starts to fade. A little bit of nuance, a little bit of gray area starts to creep back in.
And in that moment, this thought feels like a fact. It's not a question, it's a statement. There's just no room for doubt. It's this deep, gut-level certainty that you've been completely dismissed.
Then your brain just snaps into pattern-finding mode. Suddenly, this isn't just a one-time thing. Oh no, this is a fundamental part of who they are. This one moment becomes Exhibit A in a much larger, much more painful story you've been building. And this is the heaviest feeling of all. The conflict isn't about the dishes anymore, or who said what. It starts to feel like a crack in the very foundation of your connection. A really scary thought.
So how do we get a handle on this? Well, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the story that pops up within a conflict. Then we'll talk about emotional storms versus the actual truth. We'll break down the huge difference between a feeling and a verdict, walk through a practical reframing exercise, and wrap up with our main idea, seeing conflicts as storms, not the whole climate. Let's dive in.
Okay, first things first, let's look at the story itself. That narrative our brain writes in the heat of the moment, that's often the real source of our pain. Understanding why our brain does this is the first step toward getting some control back.
You know, what's so fascinating here is that this is just biology. When you're emotionally flooded, when your survival instincts kick in, your brain's main job is not to be fair or see both sides. Nope, its job is to keep you safe. And the fastest way to feel safe is to find a simple, clear, and certain explanation for what's happening.
And this is what that certainty sounds like in your head. It's full of these absolute all-or-nothing words like never and always. It takes one specific action and blows it up into a sweeping statement about their entire character, or even your own worth. These are the thoughts that can turn a tiny disagreement into a huge crisis. So this brings us to the core idea, the central metaphor of this whole explainer. The real skill we're aiming for is learning to separate what feels true in the heat of the moment from what's actually true in the long run.
And this just lays it out perfectly. An emotional storm is temporary. It feels absolute, and it craves that certainty we just talked about. But the climate of your relationship, that's the bigger picture. It's way more permanent, it's full of nuance, and its goal isn't certainty, it's understanding. Treating a temporary storm like it's the permanent climate, well, that's where deep resentment starts to build. And like we said, there's a biological reason for this. When your nervous system gets all fired up, your brain starts scanning for patterns to make sense of the threat. It starts connecting dots, but in its rush to protect you, it sometimes connects the wrong ones, preferring a big, dramatic conclusion over just sitting with uncertainty.
Okay, if you remember one thing, let it be this. Your feelings are 100% real and valid. If you feel hurt, you feel hurt. That is not up for debate. But the story, the interpretation you attach to that feeling, that is adjustable. That is where we have the power to change everything.
All right, let's make this even more real. We'll use a simple, everyday example to show how this little shift from a feeling to a story or a verdict actually happens and makes things so much worse.
So here's our situation. Super common, right? Happens in so many relationships. It's just a simple behavior, and right now it has no inherent meaning attached to it. It just is.
So the emotional reaction to this is completely understandable. That sting of feeling ignored or feeling a little hurt, that's a real experience. And it's so important to honor that feeling without judging yourself for it. But now watch what the mind does next. It layers a story right on top of that feeling. Suddenly, it's not just about a missed text anymore. It's become a judgment on your importance, your worth in the relationship. That is a gigantic leap.
This slide just nails the distinction. See, I felt unimportant in that moment. That's a feeling. It's temporary, it's specific. But you don't care about me? That's a verdict. That's a final judgment on their character. One of these can be talked about and repaired. The other one forces a person to defend who they are at their core.
Okay, so knowing all this is great, but how do we actually put it into practice when we're upset? Let's walk through a simple but really powerful exercise you can use to start questioning those exaggerated stories.
First, and this part is absolutely non-negotiable, you have to cool down. This exercise is for after the storm has passed, not while you're in the middle of it. Then, just to yourself, ask this really gentle question. What part of my story might be a little exaggerated? Not wrong, not silly, just exaggerated. Maybe it was the word always. Maybe it was assuming you knew exactly what they were thinking. And finally, when you're both calm, you can share your feeling gently.
And let's be crystal clear about the goal here. This is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending you're not hurt. It's about developing emotional maturity. We're not trying to shut down what we feel. We're trying to stop a temporary feeling from hardening into a permanent, damaging label about our partner or our relationship.
This brings us all the way back to our final and maybe most important takeaway. It's a simple little phrase you can use to anchor yourself the next time you feel a conflict starting up. The next time you're feeling that intensity rise, just try to gently remind yourself of this. This might be a storm, not the climate. Just that one sentence can create enough space to hit the pause button, to stop yourself from turning a frustrating moment into a permanent pattern, and to stop a feeling from becoming a final verdict. You know, sometimes the biggest shift in a relationship doesn't come from changing your partner. It comes from questioning a single sentence in your own head. If this helped you find a little more breathing room between a feeling and a conclusion, subscribe to Resolve Together. Here, we don't just fix arguments. We work on transforming the way we think, interpret, and ultimately reconnect.